This conference will now be recorded.
All set.
Okay, so this is a special meeting of the Darien Parks and Recreation Commission, special meeting agenda dated Wednesday, April 22nd. Virtual meeting using GoToMeeting. Calling the meeting to order at 7:37. We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is public comment. Per the posted agenda, public comment was being accepted in written form to Pam Geary up till 9 o'clock this morning. There was no written comment received, so we can dispense with that portion of the agenda. Next item on tonight's agenda is the discussion and vote on the Freight family's docking of their 2 fishing skiffs at the Pear Tree boat launch. So we did discuss this last Wednesday evening. Roger Freight Jr. was in attendance at our meeting and talked about how they use the boat and what their needs are and what the limitations of the current setup for them accessing their 2 fishing vessels, which are in the Darien Harbor, sort of in the river near the boat club are, and why limitations have developed over the years. So I'd just like to open it up for further discussion.
I sent by email the 2 minutes that pertain to our discussion, the original commission's discussion of this issue.
Yes, thank you.
July 2012 and September 2012. I also went back and looked at, watched the Vimeo of your meeting that I missed. And it seemed apparent from that the situation changed in terms of the way the Freights had to use that for the reason they used the dock, right? Because previously it sounded like they were bringing their boat ashore kind of on the sandy part near the entrance of the boat club, right? That's what I was understanding.
Yes.
And that was no longer available to them because boat club went ahead and developed different fingers for their docking, right?
Correct.
That made it impossible for other boats to get by in order for, because of where his boats were situated.
Yep.
And going back to when we made our decision, we were kind of nervous as a commission to allow it because we didn't want to set a precedent where other people would come to us with their special situations, because everybody has a special situation at the time. And so we were really, honestly, it was a really tough vote for us. We weren't going to vote for it. And Jamie Stevenson at the time really interceded on his behalf, and about his disability. So we felt as a commission it was okay for us to proceed with this exception, because we were under the under the understanding that she needed it from a physical point of view. Mr. Freight Sr. was at our meeting too, and he spoke about it. And so we said, you know what, why don't we let you do it in the winter when it doesn't really impact the way we serve the residents of Darien. So we allowed that exception, right? And with the idea that it wasn't going to be a forever situation, because we thought it was limited to Mr. Freight. And if you look at our motions, it was limited to him. And we made it clear that it was for his use purely. And then fast forward to now, the President's state of affairs, and his situation where he was able to pull that one boat on that sand is no longer available because of something that happened with the boat club. And I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, I understand his livelihood depends on his ability to get to his fishing boat, but I'm nervous again, having had this experience in 2012, to then limit our residents' ability to use that dock and ramp. It's really the only space that our residents get to use to get in, their boats in and out of. And there are situations where sometimes a resident will need to park their boat, move their car out of the way so that they can, because I don't have a boat. I'm sorry if I sound very inexperienced, but I've seen it happen where, they have to move their car, leave the boat there, momentarily to do what they might need to do, and then come back to move their boat. And I feel like that situation gets a little challenging, especially during the peak seasons of the summer, So, you know, that was the other thing. And I guess the other thing I would layer on is the whole small craft thing that, you know, we were told, like previously a lot of residents would go to beach and launch some of their small craft there, but that launch became, you know, unavailable because we had used it, you know, that it was that between the spot with the playground and the swings, there was a lot of children kind of going back and forth. So we said, you know what, we have to clear off this space, and we moved it to the other side of Reed Beach. But you know, we've been getting feedback that that's a tough spot too for people to launch small craft. So that's my concern. And I feel like I don't know what's going to happen with the restrictions with COVID-19, social distancing, but I have a sense that people really are wanting to get on their boats again. So that's my concern. But at the same time, I am extremely sympathetic to Mr. Freight and his business, especially with the climate that we're in. So let me stop there and then.
Okay, thank you for all that feedback and history, Susan. I think you've encapsulated the challenges of this request. Amy or Mike or Sarah, I'd appreciate your input and thoughts.
Hi, it's Sarah. My thought is, and I really don't have that much background in terms of being down at the beach and the logistics of boats going in and out, but just from where we are economically, I would not, I mean, maybe we let them do it this summer. It's going to be a different kind of summer, obviously, but I would feel terrible if we put a damper on a local business at this point. That's kind of where I am.
Okay, and thank you, and that's valuable input as well. Mike or Amy? Mike or Amy, any comments?
Yeah, this is Mike. So first off, can you just remind me, what have we, I know I should know this without asking the question, but what is the current agreement and what have we currently agreed to with?
The agreement up until last August had been for them to use the dock in the winter only, November till April. And that had been in place for, Susan said, 7 or 8 years, and the commission just completely lost sight of it. And at some point during that time period, they had extended their use till year round and started putting a second skiff there because of the challenges of having the other skiff over in this area of the boat club, which I have gone, I think I've mentioned in past meetings, I have gone over and walked it with my husband at low tide, and it really isn't, it isn't workable. The way they have to place the boat to address what the tide is on a given day can mean that their boat ends up being in the way of recreational boaters on that finger pier, who then basically are blocked from being able to get their vessel out and onto the water. But they just kind of started doing this, and it really came to the attention of the commission last summer when one of the boats was not placed inside, and we sent the pictures today so everybody could see it, but on the end of the pier. And we did get a complaint from a boater, and then we all started researching it and understanding what was going on. So what we agreed to as a commission last August was to allow them to put the 2 skiffs only on the east side of the dock, which is, it's very shallow in there. It's really got very limited use for anything but the very smallest of craft. Really can't get on that side. And that we would allow them to do that until the end of April, which is coming up, and that then we would revisit the situation. So what they are asking is for a continuation of that arrangement to be able to use the east side of the dock for 2 skiffs year round. And, you know, we have noticed that over the winter now, recognizing that there aren't a lot of people using the launch, and right now people can't even get in there. But I did notice when I was over there about 10 days ago that they were using both sides. And we did mention that to Roger Freight Jr., who attended our meeting last week, reminding him that it was only the one side. And then Susan did take a picture today, which she forwarded, where the skiff was parked on the end of the dock, not in the appropriate spot, which on one hand, you could say, okay, nobody can get in there anyway. But on the other hand, I think we were clear that, what our expectations were. So the ask is to continue through this, well, their ask is indefinite, but to allow them to continue to place the two skiffs on the east or southeast side, between the dock and Pear Tree Point Road through the summer. Does that help, Mike?
Yeah, that helps. So let me try to, I guess, share my thoughts. So first off, I think, so certainly Sarah makes a really important point. I mean, we're in kind of a unique window here. So I think that just adds another consideration to the conversation. But kind of barring that, I'll just go through a couple of thoughts here, and then it's not a conclusion. But so first off, I think the reason this keeps coming back to the commission in the way that it is, and the reason why it seems to me there's the level of deliberation at the commission, and thank you very much, Susan, for sending kind of the prior minutes, because I didn't fully appreciate just kind of how deeply past commissions have kind of deliberated over this, is because, at least in my mind, like, this is a really very special concession, very unique and special concession that the town has given to an individual. Now, this individual happens to be a commercial entity. I understand that, it's kind of, I guess, the last remaining commercial fisherman in town. Maybe there are others, and maybe I'm missing it. But it seems to me like this is a hugely unique and special concession. And I think, in my mind, that I guess that justifies to a certain extent the level of kind of, deliberation that's going into it. I'm also mindful of, Jamie's support and the history that I guess we've learned about kind of how this kind of, has gone on for a while. But I also feel like, along with this concession, the beneficiary of this concession has significant commercial value. I guess if I'm understanding correctly, like, the business is dependent on having this access. So that equals commercial value. So, like, sometimes when, like, I'm confronted with things like this, I try to just kind of box it out and try to figure out, okay, like, what is the formula? So, like, I'm uncomfortable taking personalities out of it and and trying to be clinical about it. I'm uncomfortable with the notion that the town is providing somebody with a very special and unique commercial concession, and simply put, isn't getting any remuneration in return. So that's part of what kind of makes me uncomfortable. Like, we've done something very special. Someone's business is dependent on that. I know this may sound kind of like it's a little, rough, but so on one hand, all things being equal, I would have asked the question, like, historically, why hasn't the town kind of simply requested some level of commercial remuneration in return for a concession? Like, I'll give you another example of a concession. A beach pass. We charge people for beach passes. So in return for the concession of having access to the beach, we charge people. So, like, it's not a foreign concept to charge somebody for something that we're giving somebody. So I'm not making the case to charge somebody, but I'm just kind of laying out an aspect of this that I find kind of a little bit of a disconnect. So here, we as a commission have awarded somebody a concession, and we haven't asked for anything in return, anything in return.
Yeah, I would add, just to interrupt, Mike, that at the August meeting, I believe it was personally, did raise the prospect of just saying, should we charge a fee for this? And
I'm not questioning whether we did or we didn't. I'm just saying.
But just at that time, the commission decided against that.
Well,
which doesn't mean we can't revisit it.
Yeah, well, we can come back to that. I'm not sure of how that decision went, but I'm just kind of trying to analyze the situation now.
Yep.
So, so once again, clinically, all things being equal, I think, if we as a commission are offering concessions to something that has to do with a park, and there's a commercial value that accrues to the person we're giving the concession to, I would just say, as a policy, we, meaning the community, the town, should be reimbursed for that. That's just, so I'm not suggesting we should have a whole other debate about a policy for like how we charge things, but we already do that. So so that's part A. Part B is, my understanding is that, and I think I could be wrong, I didn't go back and look at the prior video, but I thought I recollected that one of the reasons, once again, why this concession is kind of being extended is because, in part, I may say this incorrectly, and I apologize to, the senior Mr. Freight, but I thought there was some kind of, either it was a disability or some difficulty that kind of had been articulated in terms of Freight's ability to kind of, I don't know, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought that was part of why we were kind of suggesting we had to extend this in this way.
I believe that was in the minutes that Susan provided to us from a number of years ago. My understanding is that he doesn't do much of the fishing himself anymore, that it's mostly his son and whatever crew they have. But
Okay.
that's just my,
Once again, I'm just kind of going
it's
through
my
a list of
anecdotal
things.
understanding.
Yeah, and I apologize for taking you guys all through this, but I'm just kind of
That's fine.
walking through like the list of things that I believe I understood. Another thing that I believe I understood, and I thought Mr. Freight, who was on the call with us even last week, and once again, I could have this completely wrong, is, part of, I think, what this is all about is kind of they're lobster fishermen. And I thought that was in parts to support this kind of, lobster fishing or lobstering. And I thought Mr.
It's
Freight,
lobsters, clams, and oysters, I believe.
okay. Well, certainly the lobstering part of it, I thought was kind of as an activity diminishing. I think that's what Mr. Freight on the last call indicated. He did.
So, it's primarily the other shellfish.
So another data point, and maybe the last data point, is that we started with one boat in the winter. We now have 2 boats year round. So it's a concession that is kind of, not only being asked to be extended, but is kind of also broadening as well. So I just have to say, I'm obviously very supportive of local businesses. Clearly, I'd like to say it goes without saying, but I'll simply say it because maybe by everything I just, my preamble suggests maybe I'm not, but I am, of course, supportive of the local businesses. I just think, once again, looking at this clinically, I think there's lots of folks that would like to have a boat, like tied up at Patry Point Beach. I'm one of them. So I think we have to think about it from the policy perspective, so we can look at other people or be, prepared to answer to other people when they ask, why can't I have a boat there? Mm-hmm. And forget about, individuals like me, private individuals, but when the next business comes along and says, hey, I can make a good case for why I can have and if our answer is simply going to be because historically the town has granted the Freights the concession to have a boat at Patry Point without any remuneration to the town, then that's what we have to say. But I think we have to be very, very clear in articulating the rationale and the reason for why we're doing it or why we're not doing it. And at the moment, I think we're struggling because there's no rationale, it seems to me. So that's kind of my, and I'd be happy to weigh in on what I think, but I'll save that for a moment. I just like to just throw that out. That's my analysis. I think we're struggling because we don't have a rationale for why we're doing something that's kind of unique, and I don't believe there's a precedent for any of our other parks where we've granted anybody. Another example of a concession could be somebody asking to drive a food truck into Cherry Lawn and saying, I'd like to do it and I don't want to pay for it. Why wouldn't the town grant somebody that license, that concession to do that? And I think it's not a stretch to suggest it falls into a similar category. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm asking for here would be, wherever we end up, I think we have to articulate something, box it in, articulate it clearly, and then live with it.
Thanks, Mike. That's a lot of good thought and analysis around that. Amy?
I'm enjoying listening to all the different commentary here. I don't have a clear opinion, and maybe that's because of what Mike has suggested, that we don't have a clear protocol associated with this kind of thing. One clarification occurred to me that I'm not clear on, and that is, did we go to year round because the dynamic of the water access changed, or why did we go to year round? I don't know, maybe Susan knows, someone could answer.
We never granted him year round as a commission. They
Until last August.
until they started doing it because of what they couldn't use their boat in the way they were getting out to their other boats with their skiffs. So that was the real reason, is because it was one of the unintended consequences of when the Darien Boat Club expanded their finger piers, I guess you call them. So it then he then became unable to use that space where he would used to kind of dock his boat on the sand there to the right of the boat club entrance. There's kind of like I don't want to say beach, like an area where he used to have his skiff. And so he had come to us as a commission and said, listen, I'm at a certain age, I can't be kind of going over the boat with my knee, I think he said at the time. And he said, oh, that's not great. We're sympathetic. But as a commission, we were so, like right now, what Mike just said, really nervous about making an exception for one resident, albeit someone that's doing something truly like extraordinary, the lobster fishing. We were so nervous. We ended up offering it as an amenity, but if you look at the original motion, it was limited to Roger. It was limited to we even wrote the size of the boat that could be on it. We wanted the registration number. We asked, it was very detailed. And we said what date it could be happening at. We were very specific. That's how nervous we were about expanding the rights of usage as a commission, because we were afraid that someone would come back and say, why does someone get to put their boat there and not me? People could figure out another reason. And honestly, I was really a little bit saddened that we weren't notified of this expansion of use. Like that picture that was given today, the boat is in the spot that was the original complaint is, and it's a little bit hard to then, as a commission, say, well, let's give him this ability to do that and then not know that these type of things will not happen in the course of summer usage when we're at peak. How do we go back and say, hey, you're not, it's just hard. Our Parks and Rec staff are really overstretched already. For them to go and enforce, something that's not in our rules, regulations per se, that is an exception granted during a meeting every year, that's hard. And it's hard for us to then explain to other residents in town.
Lori?
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. My other question is, have we gotten complaints? Have we gotten anybody calling other than, sort of anecdotal while we're down there, but has anybody made a formal complaint?
We had one formal complaint in August of last summer, and that complaint was how it came to the forefront that they had started to use the dock year round against the requirements that had been put in place many years before. Ideally, as their needs changed, they should have come to the commission and asked permission. They did not. And,
right. I recall this. Yeah, I recall this.
Lori, I just want to let you know Mary Louise is joined the meeting. She's here.
Oh, good. Hi, Mary Louise.
Hi, how are you, Lori?
Good. How are you?
Good. Do the Freights not have a long history with the town of Darien and kind of somewhat of a special relationship based on that?
That is my understanding. I can't relate to you what that is. I think it has something possibly to do with the land that the boat club is on, maybe, but I can't articulate what that is.
But the family, not just Roger, but the entire Freight family has been one of almost the first families in Darien. They go back a long, long time. So they're not newcomers.
No. No, that is correct.
So I don't know how much that factors into the, his ability up to this point to get this concession, in a sense.
So based on the discussion, I'd like to get some thoughts of where people are coming out or how we might frame this out. Just from my perspective, it's not an ideal situation. Anybody who knows me at all well knows I'm a fairly rules-oriented person, and definitely have the concerns. If you're right that once you've done for one, then it makes it tricky to not make special exceptions for others. So conceptually, this just doesn't sort of sit with the way my mind works. That being said, I do know there's a deep history here, and I am also very sensitive at this immediate point in time to the struggles that all small businesses are facing. Clearly, as you know, I'm a banker, and our company and most other banks are literally working around the clock 7 days a week to help each and every small business we possibly can. That's what we're doing right now. So, it just makes it a difficult time to, make it more difficult for any small business. The only really option that I could even think of is that they would have to trailer the skiffs and launch them each day. Like the people who don't have moorings or docks do. They just they wheel their boat over, they back it in, and that poses some challenges because, as we know, depending on the tide, that boat launch is not built properly, and getting in and out at the lower tides is very difficult. So that would pose a challenge, and they do go out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's just, it's an early and long day for them, and that would add an added element. But that, as far as I can figure out myself, in terms of them accessing their moorings in Darien Harbor, they really don't have any other option. So that's just a fact that, it would have an impact on them being able to do the boat. And I recall that as they explained it last August, then they leave the skiff on the mooring while they're out doing their shell fishing, and then they come back, bring their inventory, their catch for the day onto the skiff, bring it back into the dock, and then, unload it from the skiff onto their trucks and bring it back to the store up here on the post road. So that, that's how they're making use of it. So it's their transport to and from, and then bringing the inventory back and forth. So, we would have to add that extra step. And otherwise, I don't know that there's any access point for them to get to their moorings. So that really is the challenge, of this. And it's really, it's a very difficult balance. And I, it's something that I think we're all struggling with, because there really isn't a great answer here.
Lori, I had a quick question. I did hear, this happened. I mean, he used to grant limited use, because he did have other use. And this really changed because of what happened at the boat club, expanding their docks. So, yeah. I mean, I know that they don't allow commercial fishermen in their areas, but at the same time, they caused this unintended consequence of situation. And I'm not saying we do it now, but in the future, I mean, I think it's worth talking to them about, is there a way they could help with this situation? If they're
right,
I mean, it wasn't, I mean, there's a lot of members of the boat club, but there's a huge waiting list. But honestly, if you look at the percentage of people that have docks versus the people that are residents in the town that don't have docks and have to look elsewhere or launch their boat every day, every time they have to go out, we're being unfair to that group of people too. So that's something to consider for them, because, like, again, we made the exception based upon a disability because of, in the past. And now that it's changed, it's becoming a different issue that we didn't cause per se. But at the same time, I'm not thinking that this is going to be fixed immediately. And he obviously needs access to skiffs. I'm open to letting it kind of continue on until we could work with the boat club. But I really don't see this as a, I don't know, a full-time situation. I mean, at least I wouldn't want to see it, just because I think it opens us up as a commission to, you know, all kinds of attacks from other people that might see this as political favoritism, even if it is a family with a huge historical background.
Right.
They might say, another group might say, wow, we're immigrants. You know, I mean, I'm just saying there's all these options as we
Yep.
So I don't want that to ever be an issue, but I think we definitely should think about open a dialogue with the boat club to say, hey, this happened, and and it was because of an expansion that you guys did, and you guys have more revenue because of it, or whatever. There's benefits. That's why they did it. So but there were also disadvantages, and this is one of them. So it's not something we created as a commission.
Right.
So that's what I would have us consider.
Yeah, the other thing that will become an issue going forward is when we remediate the ramp at Pear Tree, which, is a priority, that the layout of the configuration could possibly change so that that's not workable, and or it just increases the use considerably, because now I think people don't use it because it does pose challenges to use it. But we could, very possibly see the usage increase to the extent that, having those there, it just becomes too problematic. So I think it's not something that we can extend indefinitely. I was really thinking just a short-term extension to this fall that would allow us to also monitor during the summer, and also monitor very strict adherence to the placement of the boats. And then see if, we whether we get any feedback or complaints from the community. Okay, so is there any more discussion? How do people, I surfaced this back in August, and, Mike is bringing it up again, the thought of charging, a fee for this accommodation. Anybody?
I think it would be a great idea to really sit back and consider that. We do that with the concession stand. For years, the concession stand never paid any money to the town. And I think it was 3 years ago, possibly 4 years ago, that we, after maybe 16 years of not having any fee associated with it, we put one in place. And it's a very good example, similar to this.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do think we should charge some form of fee. I mean, we charge residents to go use the beach, daily, seasonally, or whatever. The townspeople who use the boat launch are charged a fee to use the boat launch, correct, Pam?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So, we do have user fee for the different amenities. So, I thought it was appropriate in August, and I still think it's appropriate.
So I'm not against charging, but I'm just offering this as a consideration, and certainly I think the town has the right to make money on its property. But if we do charge a fee, then it's a little different from the concession stand, because people are allowed to enter into a bid situation as to whether they want to be a concession provider, right? So it's open to people to try, whereas we're not actually renting this space out. It's just that we did the freights a favor, right? And so if you start to charge, then you set up a situation where we actually have a commodity that we are selling, renting, leasing. So it's just something to consider. I don't know if it's a you know, if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but we could run into a situation where people are like, look, I'm happy to pay that. Why does he get to pay that? I'm happy to pay that too.
Yep, that's a valid point, Amy.
Well, I thought of that too, Amy, but then I also then thought about Rob Williamson and Uncles at the beach, and we haven't got, I mean, that is a long-standing thing. We don't go to bid every year. I don't believe we've done that in the past. Situation many years ago that he didn't have to pay a concession fee because he was basically doing Pear Tree also, and it was a loss for him. So he was paying his staff to be there, and we wanted him there because we wanted to have the same amenities. So that's why he had a discounted situation. Also, we weren't sure if this concession, the area was going to be successful, which is why for many years we didn't know how that was going to play out. But he's had that concession forever. There's no bidding process, right? Pam, does he bid every year for that?
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead. Pam, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. You were breaking up in the last. What was the question?
About whether Rob Williamson, Uncles, bids for that Weed Beach concession.
He does now, and he's on his third year. Like, this is the last part of his
Did we
agreement.
do the contract with them or something for many years?
Yes, so next year, we would be going out to bid, and we should be in a better place because the town did approve capital money for us to purchase equipment, our own equipment inside Weed Beach.
Oh, yay.
I would just say, personally, I'm not comfortable with the concept of the town, at least in this case, the commission doing somebody a favor. I think there should be a policy. And, you know, an aspect of the policy can be, you know, a duration of the policy. It could be if there is a cost or not a cost. But I think it should be something that's a bit more specific. And I think an aspect of this, and I know I haven't articulated this, but I think the situation is a little unfair to the Freights, given the uncertainty. I mean, you know, here we are deliberating this like every, you know,
Right.
period, every year. And like these guys are basing their business on it. And they don't know, like, you know, like it could be a different set of people now who are not in the mood to do a favor or, so I think that's another aspect of this that, you know, if I were them, I'd be kind of uncomfortable, you know, like it sounds a little capricious that, you know, a commission might kind of, you know, the next time they get together, decide, well, we're not going to do it. We don't feel like doing anybody a favor anymore. So I'm just advocating for kind of determining a policy, and I'm not strongly advocating for charging, but I am kind of just acknowledging there is a commercial value here. And I think it is a unique situation in the sense that, you know, here, you know, someone's, you know, gaining commercial value through this concession, unlike a number of the other examples we cited. And we're not gaining any remuneration in return. And by the way, you know, we as a commission could set a term on something. We can say X years, we could say in perpetuity, we could say whatever we want. I just think we got to get out of this cycle of not knowing what we're saying every few years. And that's kind of my analysis. It seems like there's a level of uncertainty that emerges every time it comes to the table. And I'm just advocating for getting to kind of a formula that has a bit more certainty to it, not only for us and future commissions, but also for the Freight family. And for, you know, and for folks in town who may be wondering, like, and it doesn't sound like there's many of those people because we're not getting asked a lot of questions. I acknowledge that, or hearing a lot of complaints. But if somebody would have asked the question, I think it's good to have a more definitive answer than it's a family that's been in town for a very long time. You know, they've made lots of contributions. I mean, those are all good things, but I'm sure there's probably many families that might kind of rise to that definition as well.
Okay. So with all of that said, do we want to take a crack at a motion and then we can debate the wording of the motion and then go from there? Yes,
Well, you know,
no?
one suggestion I would make, since you've asked the question, is, you know, once again, you know, we've thrown a lot of things into the mix here, and, you know, I know we'd like to kind of get this across the goal line or button it down. But, you know, maybe And I think we had agreed that we would extend through April, which I understand is in part why there's kind of an urgency to, to kind of nail us down. But, maybe we extend it for another 6 months and allow ourselves a bit more time to figure it out, because it is kind of a unique situation. And, rather than feeling as though we have to, and we can come back to the table with a couple of different proposals. I would leave that up to you, but I do feel like maybe there's a few different kind of concepts that have been thrown into the mix this evening that folks might want to mull over a bit. But
Yeah.
by the same token, if you wanted to take a vote, I'm also prepared to take a,
Yeah, well, I am
Wait.
keen on taking a vote tonight because I feel very strongly that we got into this position because the commission, not us individually necessarily, but the commission as a body lost sight of this over the years, and then it kind of slipped and slipped and slipped until it came to our attention. We acted on it in August. We set a time definite, and I want to make sure that we maintain that rigor of saying it was extended to April 30th, and without an affirmative vote, it ends on April 30th. So I really want to make sure we demonstrate as a commission that we take this, this seriously, and it's not something we're going to let slide again, because then we could just find ourselves back in that, same, situation where somebody or the commission just doesn't, think about it, and then it goes on, and we get caught again. So that is why I'm very keen on making sure that we do something. I took a crack at some language, and this is to really just get going. As a possible motion, with it being motion to approve the use of the boat dock at Pear Tree Point Beach by the Freights for commercial purposes. Use is strictly limited to docking 2 skiffs on the southeast side of the dock. Approval for the time period May 1st, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. We could possibly add language, something to the effect of any, and just to back up, this was in the letter. Pam did send a letter to them last August outlining the arrangements that they had to provide an insurance certificate immediately following our meeting, and language that I'm going to mention now is in that letter. So we may or may not feel like we need to put it into the motion, but could be something to the effect of any incidents of the skiffs being docked on the north or west sides will result in immediate revocation of this approval. And again, only because we have had instances where the boats, including today, were just not where they are supposed to be. So I just put that out there really for, discussion, or someone can make that motion and then we discuss it, and maybe it's the right protocol.
So I would move to introduce the motion that you just read, as you've read it with the additional language as well.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second it.
Are we gonna?
Was that Amy or?
I have a
Who
question.
seconded it?
Mary Louise did.
Thank you.
Thought I did.
I have a quick question though, Lori, before you finish the motion.
Yeah, that's fine. Now we can discuss it.
Can I ask about what, are we gonna ever, I mean, I know that we're doing it, like, we're kind of kicking the can down the street lane right here. Are we gonna
Yep,
ever
we are.
figure out what the real solution is? Like, is the solution to go back to the boat club and say, hey, because, like, we need to like kind of be exploring different avenues, kind of make, because I'm not sure this is a long-term way to do it. Like, oh, we're gonna wait until we fix the boat ramp. That might change. I just feel like we're really not addressing the core issue here as a commission, which is what we did too as a commission 8 years ago, that, is this okay with us? Is this a policy that we want to continue with? Is it, are we comfortable? Is this something we're just doing because of COVID-19? Is it because he's a small business? I just want to be clear about why we're doing this.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm okay.
Well, I mean,
with
certainly
let him proceed as his business. Honestly, I am. I'm okay to vote on this motion, but I just want to be clear that that's why we're doing it.
Can I ask this then, to Susan's point, do we need to add to the motion, some language that states, with the specific intention of establishing a policy around this concession, prior to any further extension of the concession or something to that effect?
We're studying options, not even just the policy.
So Susan, maybe you need to say what you'd like to include here. Then.
I'm sorry, Mike. I just wanted to see, are there other options? Are we, I'm trying to figure out why the commission has to be.
Well, I was just suggesting putting it in a motion because then it's kind of memorialized and maybe that has more kind of teeth for the commission to take it seriously. But I'm not sure that's the best approach.
You're right. That might be the way to do it, Mike. I think you're right. That might be just.
So what would the language that would be added to the motion be?
I was simply suggesting that we extend the motion to, and I don't know if this is appropriate protocol, but we extend the motion to include language that says, with the specific intent of the commission defining, evaluating options and defining a policy prior to any further extension of this concession. In other words, kind of tying us up.
Okay. I'm writing further. Extension of this. Do we want to call it concession or extension of this use? Extension of this use. Okay. Something like it is the intent of the commission to evaluate options prior to further extension of this use, this approval?
I would say define a specific policy.
To evaluate opportunities and define a specific policy prior to further extension of this approval.
Yeah. And by the way, the policy may be, we're extending this, whatever, because of, the history of the family and, whatever we think is, an appropriate set of reasons why we're doing it. But I think we should memorialize it then, because further commissions, we may not be on it and others will have to deal with it.
Right. Okay. And then what about, I tossed out the concept of adding language in the motion regarding if there were any incidents of the boats being in the wrong spot that would result in immediate revocation. Is that something we want in the motion or just for Pam to include in the letter?
I think it's enough to go in the letter.
Yeah, but I would like it to be enforced. To make sure it's enforced.
Say that again, Susan. You're cutting in and out a bit, at least for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Might be my internet. It's not right here. It might say. I just want to make sure that it is enforced because the last thing we want is to put a rule out there and not have it be enforced. To see what happens.
Okay, so you think it should be in the motion?
I mean, is it easier for Pam, like as a commission, can we then look back and say it's in the motion and it's kind of cut and dried there, or is it easier for us to point to a letter? I don't know.
Yeah, the letter actually I noticed used the word may result in revocation. So, if we want to be first and just say, will. Depends on how firm we want to be.
That letter was sent in August that you already did, Pam?
Yeah, it was sent in August, but it expires next week, August 27th.
If we say it will result in it and we don't do it when he does it, because it becomes something that doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
So maybe it's better to use the word may.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fact that we have to go back and as a commission talk about it and say this happened X number of times.
Okay.
Then we can say we can revoke it because we already have it in this letter.
Okay. All right. So I think I've got Jamie. Do you have this down? Do you think?
I was good until that last statement, but I'll go back and piece it together.
No, that's fine. All right.
moved it around 3 times and I was like, okay, I don't even know what I'm writing anymore.
Okay,
So
all right.
I'll
Well, let
go
me
back
just,
and figure it
all right, let me just run through what I have. Motion to approve the use of the boat dock at Pear Tree Point Beach by the Freights for commercial purposes. Use is strictly limited to docking two skiffs on the southeast side of the dock. And we could put in parentheses Pear Tree Point side. Approval for the time period May 1st, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. Any incidents of the skiffs being docked on the north or west sides may result in immediate revocation of this approval. It is the intent of the commission to evaluate options and define or develop a specific policy prior to further extension of this approval. You have that? I would say develop a specific policy. Okay.
Prior to the extension of, I got all of it to there.
For prior to further extension of this approval.
Okay.
So in other words, if we don't do this by October, he's sorry, out of luck.
Can I just throw one other thing into the mix? And I as a suggestion here, I would suggest then that we ask Pam / authorize Pam to take the lead on drafting a policy or some, a couple of different options on a policy and come back to the commission with that for our deliberation, somewhat long before the time that this, before we get to October.
Okay, I do think she's going to need support of one or more members of the commission on that, though. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think Pam could always call on whoever we're all here and available. So, but yeah.
Okay.
That's fine with me.
Okay. And do we want to add to the motion a fee?
I wouldn't at this point until we've defined the policy.
Okay. 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 All right. So is everybody comfortable with the motion? Did we amend that? I guess it's a motion as amended.
So you may want to just read it one more time then for us.
Okay. Okay. You want me to go through it one more time? Okay. Motion to approve the use of the boat dock at Pear Tree Point Beach by the Freights for commercial purposes. Use is strictly limited to docking two skiffs on the southeast side, parentheses, Pear Tree Point roadside of the dock. Approval for the time period May 1st, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. Any incidents of the skiffs being docked on the north or west sides of the dock may result in immediate revocation of this approval. It is the intent of the commission to evaluate options and develop a specific policy prior to further extension of this approval.
I thought what we were suggesting is maybe to take out the language of take out the language about revoking the concession and have that in a letter. I thought that's what we were saying, or did I misunderstand what we said a moment ago?
We talked about that, but
I'd be more comfortable.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I agree with Mike. I would rather it be in a letter.
Okay. All right, Pam, as long as you feel that gives you enough teeth to do it.
The only thing I might add is make their names more formal instead of the Freights, because I don't know, maybe a cousin Freight's going to show up.
I think we asked them for the business name when we did this last August, and let's see.
I agree
He
with
said to
Amy.
use his name. I listened to the meeting where he said to use their names. He didn't
Yeah,
say
I think, yeah, that's what they've said in the past.
maybe you could say Freight Family.
Or you could say Roger Freight. Why don't we say Roger Freight?
Family. There's two of them, right? G and C.
Yeah, because there are
I'd
multiple
like to
Freight families.
identify the father and the son.
Okay.
What is the harm in leaving that language the way it is and also producing the letter?
I mean, I just think it codifies that that was the commission's intent, that we mean to play hardball on this. And if the boat's not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I was
I mean,
just thinking like it's, generally speaking, I would imagine that's probably true of many of, the concessions and policies that are in place. Maybe I'm wrong here, that you administer today, Pam, right? You, as the executive director, have a certain latitude whether or not you're kind of shutting something down or, so if it's up to you. If you feel as though that's something that you would like to see there from the commission, give
I
you.
think it does give me some backup.
and frequently Pam is enforcing something that's stated explicitly in our rules.
And it's easier for us to look back at this and see the motion. I mean, I know that it was easier for me to look at the minutes and look back what the commission
Okay,
wanted.
yeah, I'm
The intent is
okay with
clearer
it.
that way.
Okay, all right. So are we set with the motion as amended?
Yes.
Yes, everybody?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
are we ready to move to a vote?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So as you will recall, given that we are virtual, we will need to do this by roll call. So Jamie, take it away.
Okay. Lori,
Yes.
Sarah? Susan?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Mary Louise? Oh, wait, no, you seconded it. Sorry, you're fine. That's it.
And Mike, and I approve the motion as well.
Well, yeah, okay, sorry. I thought because he,
I see, because I moved it. Sorry. Got
yes, sir.
it. Keeping me honest here.
Okay, all right, and that's that. Okay, we have one last bit of business for the evening, and that is the discussion vote on the final paddle hut rules that went out. Amy did a little bit of cleanup for us, so I appreciate that. I will admit I found one more little thing I would like to fine tune. And it's just the heading that says paddle party rentals. I would suggest changing that to match the heading above, paddle hut rentals for paddle parties, and then fall and winter only. Just to make it abundantly clear that the rental of the hut is intended to go with the rental. When I reread it, I said, well, it's not clear that we're not just talking about the rental of the courts without the hut. So it would be paddle hut rentals for paddle parties, parentheses, fall and winter only. So other than that, I thought they looked great.
I just
Any
have
other?
one more quick question.
Yep.
On it, you have all the dates it was updated. And I was wondering if you could put today's date of what we approved as updated on this date. I don't know if that goes on after the fact. You write updated April 22nd, 2020.
Yeah, in fact, I think we would take out updated February 13th because we didn't, I mean, that's when we were drafted, but we didn't actually update them. So I think the February 13th date needs to be corrected to April 22nd. Thank you,
Can I
Susan. That's-
clarify, Lori, on that? You wanted to change the heading
Yes.
and to include fall and winter. Is
No,
that
it already
correct?
says fall and winter.
On the heading.
Right, see where that last, well, on mine's first read, where it says paddle party rentals, parentheses, fall and winter only. It's in bold.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just proposing we change that to paddle hut rentals for paddle parties. And then fall and winter only.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, any other final changes or corrections? Okay, if that's the case, I would appreciate a motion to approve the addendum number 5 to the Parks and Recreation rules, which is the Weed Beach paddle tennis courts and paddle house use and rental policy as amended.
I'll move it. Susan.
Susan? Second? Amy? Any further discussion? Okay, then Jamie, when you're ready, you can take a roll call.
All right, Lori,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and Mary Louise.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, all right, and Pam, remember that we have 30 days to get the new
Letter.
document, posted and circulated where, the different places they're required to be put on record.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay, and then we will need to, I'll give some thought to, and others can, as to what part of the rules we wish to tackle next. It may be around the boat and the boat launches, because I think that's the section that would have to be looked at in respect to the previous discussion we had with the boat use ramp. So maybe that's the next one we want to go, but just people give that some thought and we'll tackle that next. So, okay, well, given that this is a special meeting, we cannot add anything to the agenda. So that concludes our business for the evening. So I will need a motion and then a vote to adjourn.
I
So
move.
moved. Second.
Okay, I heard Mary Louise move and Mike second.
Correct.
All right. So Lori,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Susan, Amy,
Yes.
that's it.
All right, thank you, everybody.
I'd
Hopefully,
like to add one thing.
I'm
I
not
wanted
sure
to
you're,
congratulate Mike for being selected as the volunteer of the year. Is that what the title was, I think?
Pam, I'm embarrassed enough about this, so it's.
Well, I want to congratulate him. It's well deserved.
Thank you.
congratulations, Mike.
Congratulations.
Wow, that
Thank you
is
all.
really something. Good for you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's
We're all
amazing.
going to drive by your house and beep our horns.
Oh, God. Give me something to
Thank
do.
you, guys. Much appreciated.
All right.
All right, thanks, everybody, and let's hope that we can actually see each other in person in the not too distant future.
Indeed.
Be
Ugh.
safe.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, guys. Thanks.